The smell of roasted chicken still hangs in the air as my own son calls me a spare human, and the words land heavier than the dish in my hands. As I fold the towel slowly, I let that same warm scent steady me instead of letting his cruelty shake me. While the aroma lingers, it wraps around the truth I've ignored for too many years. The same smell that once meant family now exposes how long I've been holding up a home that resents me. That's when I realize he depends on me far more than he ever respected me. Still, I decide quietly, if I'm so spare, then today I remove the one thing keeping him standing. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The smell of roasted chicken drifted through the Monroe kitchen, warm and homey in a way the room itself hadn't felt in years. Evelyn Monroe stood just around the corner in the hall, folding the dish towel she'd taken from the dryer. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. She just moved slower these days, quieter without meaning to, and voices had a way of reaching her before she reached them. "She's in the way again," Caleb muttered. The words slipped under the doorframe and lodged themselves in Evelyn's chest. She froze, fingers pinched around warm cotton. His tone wasn't frustrated, it was exhausted, like her presence was a weight he had to shift just to walk across his own life. Megan's fork scraped a plate. "Well, she does hover," she said lightly. "I'm not hovering," Evelyn whispered to herself. But the whisper didn't leave the hallway. Caleb sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh he used when bills were due or the garage door stuck again. "I swear, it's like having an extra body just sitting around. She's always here, always needing something." Evelyn felt the edges of her vision tighten, like her glasses had suddenly shrunk. Sadie's voice rose faintly. "Dad, come on, she's not—" But Caleb cut her off. "We're doing everything for her right now. Everything. And she's just—" He exhaled sharply. "In the way." Evelyn took one steadying breath and stepped into the dining room. Caleb's eyes snapped up. He must have realized she'd heard something because his face flickered. Guilt, annoyance, then a cold sort of resolve. He straightened in his chair like a man cornered. "You know what?" he said, jaw tightening. "Fine, I'll say it. You're just a spare human here." The words landed with a force she didn't expect. Blunt, graceless, and cruelly confident. A spare human. Extra. Unnecessary. Disposable. Megan's reaction came fast, a dry laugh as she reached for her water glass. "God, Caleb, he didn't mean it like that." But the smirk tugging at her mouth said she didn't mind the phrasing one bit. Sadie dropped her fork. "Dad!" she snapped, her voice cracking like thin ice. "Why would you—" Caleb lifted a hand toward her, not to soothe, but to shut the moment down. "Enough, Sadie. It's the truth. We're doing all the work here, keeping things together." Evelyn stood at the doorway, feeling the warmth from the oven at her back and a chill from the dining room in front of her. She folded her towel once more, slower this time, and laid it over the chair nearest her. "All right," she said softly. "Just that." A single syllable slipped free before she could shape anything more, anything bigger. Fighting back would only make her voice shake, and she refused to give him that satisfaction. She moved to the dinner table, chair legs creaking against the hardwood. She sat down with a grace that was half habit, half dignity. Sadie watched her with wide, worried eyes. A tremble of apology sat behind them, even though she had nothing to apologize for. Megan nudged the salad bowl toward Caleb, humming as if the entire exchange had been nothing more than an awkward joke. Conversation resumed. Not good conversation, just the clatter of utensils, Megan listing errands out loud, Caleb chewing too hard. Sadie barely touched her food, her hands clenched in her lap. Evelyn ate quietly, each bite measured and small. She didn't look up again, didn't speak, didn't show the burning tightness the words had left behind. A spare human. She swallowed the last bite and lifted her water glass with fingers that trembled only slightly. When she set it down, the faint clink echoed louder than anything else in the room. She placed her napkin beside her plate, smoothing the corners. "I'll go clean up in a bit," she murmured. No one answered. Evelyn rose from the table, back straight, heart steadying with every step toward the kitchen. The shadows in the hall felt thicker now, but steadier too, like they were offering her cover, a quiet place to breathe. As she reached the sink, she paused. Her hands hovered over the faucet, not yet ready to turn it on. Behind her, Caleb's voice drifted from the dining room again, low and irritated. "She acts like she owns the place." Something inside her shifted, small, sharp, decisive. She didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew this: the hinge that held her in this house had just come loose, and tomorrow, something was going to change. The next morning arrived gray and thin, a slice of winter light barely cutting through the blinds. Evelyn sat alone at the small oak desk in her bedroom, the one her husband, Mark, had built decades ago when money was tight, but their patience with each other wasn't. She pulled the top drawer open and reached for the accordion binder stuffed with years of neatly filed statements. A lifetime of record-keeping had trained her hands to be steady, but today they felt older than she liked to admit. She flipped the binder open. Page after page of printed receipts, online transfers, and envelopes stamped with the logo of the Boise Valley Credit Union stared back at her. Mortgage contributions, emergency transfers. "Just until my next raise," Caleb had always said, his voice wrapped in faux responsibility. Only he never did get that raise, she thought, sliding a highlighter cap off with her thumb. She began reviewing each sheet, starting 6 years back. The fluorescent yellow marker swept across the first $600 she'd sent. A soft inhale. She highlighted another, and another. Her eyes moved faster with each page, cataloging a running truth she had always known in quiet corners of her mind, but never dared to stare at directly. She'd been bailing them out long before she lived under their roof. She'd been smoothing the edges of Caleb's crises since before he married Megan. And somewhere along the line, she'd started believing the story he liked to tell, that he was the one holding the family together. But here, in black ink and bright yellow streaks, the real story glowed back at her. A knock sounded at the front door. Light. Familiar. Helen Brooks didn't believe in ringing doorbells unless it was after dark or during flu season. "Evelyn?" she called. "You up?" "Yes, come in," Evelyn answered, though her voice didn't quite carry the way it normally did. Helen stepped into the room, her thick winter cardigan dotted with pine needles from her morning walk. Her eyes landed almost immediately on the binder spread open across the desk. "You're doing taxes early?" she asked. "No," Evelyn said, barely above a whisper. "I'm sorting things." Helen's brows lowered as she came closer. "You look like you didn't sleep." Evelyn didn't answer at first. She pressed her palm gently across one of the highlighted pages as though trying to keep the truth from blowing away. The words from last night swelled up again, sharp and uninvited. She straightened her posture, swallowed once, and repeated them carefully, like quoting a line she wished she could forget. "He told me I'm a spare human." Helen's breath caught. "He said that?" Evelyn nodded. Slowly, Helen reached for her glasses, sliding them on so she could look at the pages more clearly. "Sweetheart, these are mortgage payments." "Yes." "Every month?" Evelyn nodded again, this time tighter. "And he said that to you?" Helen asked, her voice rising with restrained fury. "While taking this?" Evelyn didn't trust her voice enough to speak, so she simply slid the highlighter down another line. $450. "Just until my next raise." $500. Just until Megan's hours stabilize. 700 os. Just this once. Lies, excuses. She hadn't kept track of the words. Just the numbers. Helen placed a hand on Evelyn's back, warm and grounding. You're not just part of that house. Her voice grew firmer. You're holding their roof up. Evelyn blinked at the phrasing. It hit harder than she expected. Holding their roof up. A 72-year-old woman with a fixed income and careful habits had been keeping her 46-year-old son from collapsing financially. Meanwhile, he had tossed her dignity aside like clutter. A vibration buzzed across the wooden surface of the desk. Evelyn's phone lit up, the screen reflecting off the silver rim of her glasses. A text from Caleb. Don't forget the transfer tomorrow. Her stomach tightened, not with sadness this time, but with something clearer, sharper. She stared at the message long enough for the glow to fade. Helen leaned in, reading it over her shoulder. Oh, absolutely not, she muttered. Evelyn closed the binder slowly, pressing the edges into a neat rectangle. The highlighter clicked shut between her fingers. This time, the tremble in her hands wasn't fear. It was resolve. And standing there, the morning cold settling around them, she knew exactly where she needed to go next. The Boise air bit colder when Evelyn stepped out of Helen's Subaru and onto the cracked pavement outside Price and Alder Law Office. The building looked like every small-town legal space she'd ever passed. Tan brick, clean windows, a flag that needed replacing. But today, it felt different. Today, it felt like a place where something might shift. She clutched the binder against her ribs, the edges pressing into her coat. Helen walked beside her, one steadying hand hovering just close enough to catch her if the cold or nerves got the better of her. Inside, the lobby was quiet. Soft carpet, pine-scented cleaner, and a receptionist typing lightly at a desk. She gave Evelyn a reassuring smile. You must be Mrs. Monroe. Mr. Price is ready for you. Evelyn exhaled, a small, shaky breath. She wasn't ready, but she nodded anyway. Matthew Price's office was lined with shelves, legal books, framed certifications, and a few family photos that showed a man comfortable in his own life. He rose as she entered, offering a warm smile and a handshake that wasn't rushed or dismissive. Mrs. Monroe, he said, I'm glad you came in. Evelyn wasn't used to hearing that. Glad you came. Glad you're here. Most days with Caleb and Megan felt like she was something to work around. Helen settled into the chair beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Matthew sat across from them, folding his hands on the desk. Why don't you tell me what brings you today? Evelyn placed the binder on his polished desk. The faint tremor in her fingers returned, and she pressed them flat against the cover to steady herself. It's about financial support, she began. Support I've been giving my son. For years. Her voice wavered on years, but she pushed through it. Matthew opened the binder, scanning the neatly filed transfers. His eyebrows eased down in concentration, then twitched upward just slightly as he saw the amounts. Then the frequency. Then the dates. You've been contributing to his mortgage? He asked. Evelyn nodded. Since 2018. 46 payments. Helen added quietly. And these were... Matthew paused. Voluntary? The question caught Evelyn off guard. She looked down at her hands, a map of veins and thin skin and years of routine. I felt I had to. He always had a reason, a problem, a shortfall. Her throat tightened. He made it sound like their home would fall apart if I didn't help. Matthew leaned back, expression softening with the kind of concern that wasn't pity, but recognition. Mrs. Monroe, what you're showing me here isn't generosity anymore. It's dependency. On you. Financially, and in a way that borders on exploitation. Evelyn blinked at the word. It hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Exploitation. She'd never framed it that way. She'd just... helped, over and over, because mothers did that. Because she didn't want her son to fail, because she thought being useful was the only way to avoid becoming a burden. "I've been scared to say no," she admitted, the confession cracking something inside her. "I didn't want him to think I wasn't contributing." Matthew gave a small, understanding nod. "Mrs. Monroe, from everything you've shown me, you are the one keeping him afloat, not the other way around." Helen squeezed her hand gently, the touch grounding, like she was telling Evelyn she wasn't imagining things, wasn't being dramatic, wasn't losing her mind. Matthew continued, his tone shifting into steady assurance. "There are protections available to you. We can revoke his access to any shared accounts. We can remove him from emergency authorizations. And we can legally establish that your assets are solely your own." Evelyn inhaled a slow breath. She felt each word settle like sand in a jar, filling spaces she didn't know were empty. "You don't have to keep funding his life," Matthew said. "Not out of fear, and certainly not out of obligation." Obligation, fear, spare human. All of it collided in her chest. Helen's hand tightened around hers, just enough pressure to say, "I'm here." Evelyn finally spoke. "What do I have to do?" Matthew slid a stack of initial forms toward her. "Sign these authorization pages. They'll let me begin removing your son from the accounts where he currently has access." Evelyn reached for the pen. Her hand trembled, but not with hesitation, with clarity. She signed each page, slow and deliberate. As the last signature dried, Matthew looked up. "We'll start these changes today, Mrs. Monroe." Evelyn nodded, and then her phone buzzed in her purse, sharp, intrusive. A text from Caleb flashed across the screen. "Mom, you didn't answer. You're still doing the transfer tomorrow, right?" Her hand hovered over the screen. Then she turned it face down. The next morning, frost glazed the edges of Evelyn's kitchen window, blurring the pine trees outside into soft silhouettes. She stood at the counter with a mug of chamomile tea, hands wrapped around the warmth, as if it could steady the new, unfamiliar certainty settling inside her. Yesterday had cracked something open. Today, she would follow it through. Helen arrived right on time, coat zipped, hair slightly windblown, eyes sharp with purpose. "Ready?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Evelyn placed her mug in the sink with a quiet clink. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. They drove to the Boise Valley Credit Union together, the heater humming against the morning chill. The parking lot was empty except for a delivery van and a lone sedan, and for a moment, Evelyn wondered how many other people walked into these doors carrying secrets they'd kept too long. Inside, the lobby smelled of fresh paper and pine-scented disinfectant. A young teller with a tidy bun smiled at them. "How can I help you today?" Evelyn set her purse on the counter and took a breath. "I'd like to make some changes to my accounts." The words felt small, but she wasn't. The teller guided them into a glass-walled cubicle, tapping on a keyboard as she brought up Evelyn's file. "Which accounts would you like to update, Mrs. Monroe?" Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. "The joint emergency account," she said. "I want all secondary access removed." The teller's fingers hesitated over the keys. "You mean remove your son's authorization?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes." Helen sat beside her, silent but solid, an anchor. The teller clicked a few more times, printing out a short form. "I'll need your signature here to finalize the removal." Evelyn signed in clean, deliberate strokes. For 6 years, Caleb had treated her money like a reliable extension of his own. Today, that hinge snapped shut. When the teller confirmed the change complete, Evelyn felt something release in her chest, like air she hadn't known she'd been holding finally slipped free. "Anything else?" the teller asked. "Yes," Evelyn said. "I'd like to open a new personal account, one with restricted access. Only me. This time, the words didn't tremble at all. Helen helped her choose security questions, passwords, and transfer protections far stronger than anything she'd used before. Evelyn watched the screen as her name appeared alone on the new account. No shared access, no linked permissions. It felt like drawing a boundary line in fresh snow, clear, bright, undeniable. Once the new account was active, she shifted all her automatic transfers, utilities, prescriptions, even the small monthly donation she made to the senior center, away from any channel Caleb could see or touch. Every click confirmed another inch of distance between her life and his expectations. By the time they left the credit union, the sun had climbed higher, casting cold white light over the parking lot. Evelyn walked slower than usual, not from weariness but from the strange lightness in her steps. On the drive home, she rested her hand on the binder in her lap. "I didn't realize how much he'd worked his way into everything," she murmured. "Every bill, every account, every decision." Helen glanced at her. "That stops now." Evelyn nodded. "Yes, it does." Later that afternoon, as the day thinned into the softer golden edges of early evening, the front door opened and Sadie stepped inside. School backpack slung over one shoulder, hair falling out of her braid, she paused in the entryway as though sensing a shift in the air. "Grandma?" she called softly. "I'm in the kitchen, sweetheart." Sadie patted in, dropping her backpack on the bench. She looked at Evelyn closely, really looked, her eyes tracing the slight lift in her posture, the calm in her hands, the absence of last night's heaviness. "You seem different," Sadie said. "Better." Evelyn smiled gently, brushing a hand along her granddaughter's cheek. "I'm all right," she said. "Just sorting a few things." Sadie studied her another beat, but didn't pry. She hugged her instead. Quick, warm, grounding. "Okay, I'm glad." Evelyn held her for a moment longer than usual, then released her. She wasn't ready to explain everything yet. Not until the ground beneath her was fully settled, but soon, very soon. As dusk darkened the windows, Evelyn stood at the stove stirring a pot of soup when her phone rang on the counter. Caleb's name flashed on the screen, sharper than any ringtone. She didn't pick it up. It rang again. Louder this time, vibrating against the granite. Then again. Finally, she sighed and pressed answer, bracing her voice into calm neutrality. His tone was already raised, clipped with frustration. "Mom, the transfer didn't come through. What's going on? I told you I needed it today." Evelyn stirred the soup once, slowly. "I won't be doing that anymore." Silence. Then a disbelieving laugh, thin, sharp-edged. "What does that mean?" he demanded. She said nothing. Let the quiet stretch. Let him hear the boundary he'd never expected. Caleb's angry voice still echoed faintly in Evelyn's mind the next morning, but it no longer shook her. She moved through her house with a quiet purpose, washing her favorite mug, pulling on her soft gray sweater, smoothing her hair back with steady fingers. She'd already taken the first steps. Today, she would follow through. Helen pulled into the driveway at exactly 9, as dependable as sunrise. "You ready for round 2?" she asked, leaning over to pop open the passenger door. Evelyn slid in. "More than ready." They drove through the pine-lined Boise suburbs toward Matthew Price's office, frost still clinging stubbornly to shaded lawns. The air felt different today, charged with something electric. Not fear, not rebellion, but reclamation. Inside the law office, Matthew greeted them with the same warm steadiness he'd shown before, though there was something firmer in his gaze today, something protective. "Mrs. Monroe," he said as they settled in, "I reviewed everything you left with me, and there's something you need to see." He turned a stack of papers toward her, tapping one page with his index finger. "This," he said, "is a breakdown of your son's mortgage payments over the last 6 years. I compared your documented contributions with their lender's records." Evelyn leaned closer, adjusting her glasses. There, in clean printed rows, were the numbers she'd highlighted days ago, except now grouped into totals, percentages, calculations. Matthew spoke gently, but not softly. "Your payments account for 40% of their mortgage, Mrs. Monroe." Evelyn blinked, absorbing it. She'd known she'd helped. She'd known she'd been giving more than she should. But 40%? Almost half? Helen swore under her breath, low and fierce. "Evelyn," Matthew continued, voice steady, "without that 40%, they will fall behind, quickly. Their lender already shows they're carrying high credit usage and irregular payment patterns." He lifted another sheet, this one highlighting a future projection. "If your contributions stop completely, which they should, Caleb will be underwater in about 3 months. 3 months? 90 days. Not long at all." Evelyn let the information settle. She waited for guilt to rise, for the familiar, reflexive tug of responsibility to tighten around her. Instead, she felt calm, as if the truth had rearranged itself into something she could finally see clearly. She folded her hands neatly in her lap. "All right." Matthew paused, studying her expression. "Are you sure you understand the implications? He will likely react strongly once the financial strain begins." "I'm sure," Evelyn said, and this time every word felt anchored. "He told me I wasn't needed. I'm simply giving him what he said he wanted." Helen let out a breath, a mix of pride and anger and relief all at once. "Good for you." Matthew nodded once. "Then there are more steps we can take. Steps to ensure your financial independence is protected, now and in the future." He brought out another set of documents, sliding them to the center of the desk. "These revoke all financial permissions currently tied to your son: account access, emergency authorizations, shared financial responsibility. Everything." Evelyn reached for the pen before he finished speaking. One signature after another, her name looping smoothly across the page. Each stroke felt like removing a shackle she hadn't realized was locked around her. Matthew watched with a quiet respect. When she handed the final page back, he said, "There's one more thing we should discuss." He pulled out a thick manila folder. Inside sat a draft document she hadn't expected today, but recognized instantly: her will. Evelyn inhaled slowly. She had always intended to leave her estate to Caleb and Sadie, split evenly. It had felt fair, sensible, predictable. Matthew's tone softened. "Given the level of financial dependency and the emotional manipulation you've described, you have the right to protect your assets from potential misuse." He slid a revised draft across the desk. "This version removes Caleb entirely." The room stayed very still, the hum of the office printer in the hallway. The muffled phone ring at reception, Helen's hand resting, ready, near Evelyn's elbow. Evelyn felt no panic, no hesitation, just truth. She picked up the pen. "It's time," she said. Her signature glided across the bottom of the document, firm and final. When she handed it back, Matthew gave a small approving nod. "We'll process the update today. Mrs. Monroe, you've taken every possible step to protect yourself." Before she could respond, Helen was already reaching for the notary stamp. "Let me do this part," she said, her voice thickening with emotion. "Feels right that I'm the one to witness it." The stamp pressed down with a sharp, satisfying thud. Seal complete. Decision made. Future rewritten. As they rose to leave, Evelyn felt lighter than she had in years. But the moment she stepped out into the cold air, her phone vibrated violently in her coat pocket, 3 times in a row, then again. Caleb. Calling. 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 Evelyn stared at the screen, thumb hovering. The storm didn't hit with thunder or wind. It arrived as a notification. One short, sharp ping that jolted Caleb awake hours before dawn. Mortgage auto payment. Failed. The words flashed across his phone screen in bold red, the kind of red that made his pulse spike. He sat up in bed, chest tightening, sweat gathering at the base of his neck. Megan stirred beside him, groggy and irritated. "What now?" she muttered. Caleb shoved the phone toward her. It didn't go through. The mortgage payment. It bounced. Megan blinked, then frowned. "Call your mother, now." He already was. But the phone rang out. Then again. And again. By late morning, the tension in Caleb had fermented into something combustible. He slammed his truck door shut and stormed up Evelyn's walkway, boots crunching against the thin crust of melting frost. He didn't bother knocking softly. 3 heavy bangs echoed through the house like a battering ram. Evelyn looked up from the laundry room where she stood quietly folding a dish towel. She heard the rage behind the knocks, heard the entitlement fused into every strike of his hand. She took her time finishing the fold, aligning the edges neatly the way she always did, years of habit grounding her. Then she walked to the front door and opened it. Caleb shoved his way inside before she could greet him. "What the hell, Mom?" he snapped, waving his phone in her face. "The payment didn't go through. You didn't do the transfer." "Do you have any idea what that means for us?" Evelyn closed the door gently behind him. "I do." Her calmness only seemed to ignite him further. "Then why didn't you pay it? You always pay it." She stepped past him toward the kitchen, retrieving the dish towel she'd folded earlier and placing it on the counter. "That's the problem," she said softly. "I always have." Caleb stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language. "And you're acting like that's bad? You know our situation. You know how tight things are. You can't just—" "I can," Evelyn said. "And I am." The words hung there, steady as leveled wood. Caleb's voice cracked with disbelief. "Mom, I need you to fix this." Evelyn turned to face him fully, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the counter. "I'm not fixing anything for you anymore." A beat of stunned silence. Then Megan swept in through the still open front door, her face pinched, her lips already twisted into accusation. "This is unbelievable," she said. "You're being dramatic. Over one payment?" "Evelyn, honestly." Evelyn felt the impulse, the old one, to shrink back, to apologize, to explain. But it didn't come. Not today. She lifted the dish towel and folded it once more, a simple gesture that steadied her spine. "This isn't drama," she said. "This is me making a choice." Megan scoffed. "You're overreacting. You can't just stop helping without warning." Evelyn met her eyes, unblinking. "I gave you all warning the night Caleb said I was a spare human. I listened to what he told me I was." Caleb stepped forward, hands tightening into fists at his sides, not with violence, but with desperation. "Mom, I didn't mean it like—" "You said I wasn't needed," Evelyn interrupted. Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack. It simply landed. "So now, act like it." Megan's jaw fell open, indignation turning sharp. "This is ridiculous. You're putting our entire home at risk. You're really going to let us drown over some hurt feelings?" "No," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm stopping because you depended on me without gratitude, without honesty, and without respect." She folded the towel one last time and set it neatly on the counter. "I won't bankroll your life anymore." Caleb's face changed. Fear flickered behind his anger. Real fear. The kind born from realizing a safety net had vanished, and the fall below was real. "Mom," he said, voice cracking. "Please, we can't afford this." Evelyn didn't look away. "I know." Outside, A gust of icy wind rattled the porch railings. The house felt still, as if holding its breath. Megan grabbed Caleb's arm. "Let's go. She's lost it. We'll figure it out ourselves." But Caleb didn't move. He stared at his mother like he was seeing her for the first time in decades, and realizing she was no longer standing where he'd left her. Evelyn stepped closer, not unkind, but firm. "You wanted me spare," she said. "You made sure I heard it. Now you can live like it's true." Caleb's throat worked as he tried to speak, but nothing came. Nothing except panic. The house felt strangely quiet after Caleb and Megan stormed out, their panic still echoing faintly through the air like leftover static. Evelyn didn't chase after them. She didn't second-guess herself. She simply picked up the folded dish towel and returned it to the drawer, the soft slide of the wood grounding her. By noon, Helen had arrived with a paper bag of muffins and that look. Half worry, half approval. "You held your line," Helen said as she settled into the dining chair. "Good." Evelyn exhaled slowly, lowering herself into the seat across from her. "I did. But you look like you haven't taken a full breath since." "I'm learning how," Evelyn admitted. Helen reached into the binder Evelyn had left on the table, flipping through the neatly highlighted pages. "Let's take another look at everything. I want to make sure every tie you cut stays cut." They reviewed the records again. Her transfers, the loan numbers, every "just this once" scribbled in Caleb's old emails. The numbers no longer felt like guilt. They felt like evidence. Proof of how deep she'd been pulled in without ever being thanked. Or even seen. "This house," Helen murmured, tapping a highlighted section, "has been standing on your money for years. You just never let yourself say it." Evelyn stared at the binder, a dull ache forming behind her ribs. "I thought helping made me useful." Helen's reply was gentle but unwavering. "It made you exploited." The word hit differently now. Less painful. More clarifying. Evelyn reached for her phone, navigating to her medical portal. With a few taps, she removed Caleb as her emergency contact. His name disappeared as smoothly as a drop of ink wiped from a counter. "You want me to add mine?" Helen asked. Evelyn looked up, eyes warming. "Would you?" Helen handed her the muffin bag in response. "I'm not going anywhere." Evelyn added Helen's name and number, pressed save, and felt something inside her finally settle. The quiet didn't last long. By mid-afternoon, Evelyn's phone buzzed across the table. "Megan, we're really disappointed in you. After everything we've done for you. Think about Sadie. Think about us. This is selfish and dramatic." Another message followed seconds later. "Megan, you can still fix this before things get worse." Helen snorted. She has some nerve. Evelyn didn't answer, not because she was being petty, but because there was nothing left to explain. Her silence was a boundary, and she held it. The phone buzzed again. Then stopped. For the first time in years, ignoring them didn't make Evelyn feel guilty. It made her feel free. Around 4, the front door cracked open softly. Sadie stepped in. Cheeks flushed from the cold, hair tucked beneath a knit beanie. She dropped her backpack by the bench but didn't call out like usual. Instead, she walked into the kitchen slowly, eyes scanning Evelyn's face. "Grandma?" she said gently. "Are you okay?" Evelyn's throat tightened. She'd been preparing for this conversation without realizing it. "Yes," Evelyn said. "I am." Sadie moved closer, worry deepening. "Dad's been pacing all day. Mom keeps saying you're being unreasonable." She paused, voice dropping. "But I don't believe them. Not for a second." Evelyn reached out, brushing a piece of hair from Sadie's cheek. "You shouldn't have had to see any of this." Sadie shook her head. "I've seen more than they think. I know when people are being unfair." Evelyn inhaled, steady and slow. It was time. Come sit with me, she said. They moved to the couch, the late afternoon light stretching across the room. Evelyn held Sadie's hand, feeling the small warmth of it settle into her palm. I need to tell you something, she began. Something that happened, and something I've decided. Sadie's eyes didn't leave her. No judgment, only concern. Evelyn told her, not every number, not every detail, but enough. Enough for Sadie to understand the weight of the contributions, the disrespect she'd endured, the moment her son had called her spare, and the steps she'd taken to protect herself. By the time she finished, Sadie's eyes were shining with hurt and anger, not at Evelyn, but for her. I'm so sorry, Sadie whispered, squeezing her hand. You didn't deserve any of that. Not from them. Evelyn smiled softly. Thank you, sweetheart. Sadie leaned her head onto Evelyn's shoulder. I'm glad you stood up for yourself. Evelyn kissed the top of her granddaughter's hair. So am I. For a moment the room felt warm again, but the peace didn't last. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Evelyn's phone lit up across the room, this time not with Megan's buzzing accusations or Caleb's frantic calls. A new message. From an unknown number. Mrs. Monroe, this is your son's lender. We need to speak with you regarding the recent account changes. Evelyn's breath hitched. The message from the lender lingered in Evelyn's mind all night, but it didn't keep her awake. She slept deeper than she had in weeks, wrapped in the quiet certainty of her own decisions. By morning, the sun had thawed the frost outside, and the kitchen smelled of brewing coffee. She stood at the counter buttering a slice of toast when gravel crunched violently outside. Too fast, too aggressive. Caleb. She could tell by the way the car door slammed. A moment later, he burst into the house without knocking, breath clouding in the cold air behind him. His face was flushed, anger, panic, and something more frantic than either. Mom, he snapped, you need to fix the transfers, now. Evelyn calmly spread the butter to the edges of the toast. Good morning, Caleb. He stared at her like she was speaking another language. Don't do that. Don't act like everything is fine. The lender called us. Called you, apparently. You can still fix this before things hit our credit. Evelyn set the butter knife down, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and turned to him with complete, unhurried steadiness. Would you like some tea? What? He barked. Tea, she repeated, walking toward the kettle. You look cold. You should warm up. I don't want tea, he shouted. I want you to fix what you broke. Evelyn paused only long enough to raise one eyebrow, not with sass, but with a quiet, baffling calm that made Caleb falter for half a second. She set 2 mugs on the counter anyway. He ran a frantic hand through his hair. You don't understand, Mom. This isn't just about a payment. This affects everything. Our credit, our refinancing options, our, Evelyn said softly. You mean yours? Caleb's jaw clenched so hard it trembled. This is unbelievable. You're ruining things. She took her time choosing a tea bag, placing it gently in the mug. No, Caleb, she said. I stopped allowing you to ruin me. The front door opened again, this time a controlled, purposeful entrance. Helen stepped inside without waiting for permission, her expression already set in that fierce, protective way Evelyn had come to rely on. I figured he'd show up here, Helen said, closing the door behind her. I saw his truck halfway up the street, tires still smoking. Caleb glared at her. This is a family matter. Helen crossed her arms. And I'm family enough for her. Evelyn felt the statement land like a shield sliding into place beside her. She continued boiling the water as if the room weren't vibrating with tension. Caleb threw his hands up. You're letting her manipulate you. Helen scoffed. The only manipulating that's been going on is what you've been doing to your mother for years. Caleb rounded on Evelyn again, ignoring Helen's words. Mom, listen to me. You can't just pull out. We depended on that money. There it was. The truth he thought would guilt her back into place. Evelyn poured the hot water into the mugs, steam rising between them like a soft, invisible curtain. She turned to face him fully. You told me I wasn't needed, she said, voice level and unwavering. I listened. Megan's voice sliced in from the doorway before Caleb could respond. She must have followed him in another car. Her coat still half-zipped, hair disheveled. Abandoning us? Megan said coldly. At your age? Over one comment? This is cruelty, Evelyn. Evelyn's hands didn't even twitch. She lifted one mug and inhaled the steam. You think I'm abandoning you, she said. But all I've done for years is support you. You were supposed to? Megan fired back. That's what family does. Respect is what family does. Helen cut in sharply. Support is earned, not extorted. Caleb stepped closer to Evelyn, desperation taking over the anger. Mom, please, we can't handle this without you. Evelyn looked at him with a softness he didn't deserve, but a clarity he needed to see. You'll have to learn, she said. The kettle clicked off behind her, a quiet punctuation to a conversation 11 years overdue. Caleb swallowed hard, voice breaking. If you don't help, we could lose everything. Evelyn set his untouched mug on the counter. You already lost me, she said. The rest is yours to manage. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, Caleb's fear filling every inch of the room. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice, a third time. He checked it and went pale. Megan leaned over his shoulder, her face blanched too. What? Helen demanded. What now? Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. The lender. They flagged our account for a manual review. They want documents we don't have. He looked up at Evelyn, eyes wide, voice shaking. Mom, they know someone else has been paying the mortgage. Evelyn didn't move. Caleb stood in Evelyn's kitchen looking like the floor had cracked beneath him. His phone screen glowed in his shaking hand, the lender's warning email still open. Megan hovered beside him, one hand covering her mouth, the other gripping his arm as if she could anchor him to a reality already slipping away. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She simply reached for her tea, lifted the mug, and said nothing. Because the real blow, the one Caleb truly wasn't ready for, hadn't landed yet. 2 days later, Evelyn sat once more in the quiet office of Price and Alder, the winter light spilling through the blinds in cold strips. Helen sat beside her, arms crossed, eyes alert. Matthew entered with a folder in hand, thicker this time. Serious. Mrs. Monroe, he said as he took a seat across from her, I've received some updates from the credit union you visited last week, and there's something I need to bring to your attention. Evelyn tightened her grip on her purse strap. Go on. Matthew opened the folder, tapping one page with the blunt end of his pen. Your son attempted to access your old joint emergency account, after you had already revoked his permissions. Evelyn blinked. She'd expected anger, maybe more guilt, but not this. Matthew slid the printed alert closer. He tried twice. Both attempts flagged as unauthorized. The bank has noted it as potential financial misconduct. Helen leaned forward. They're investigating him? They have to, Matthew replied. He attempted entry into a protected account. That triggers mandatory review. Evelyn's pulse thudded once, hard. She pressed her hand against her chest, breathing slow, measured breaths she'd learned long ago during hospital shift breaks. Mrs. Monroe, Matthew continued, voice gentling. You didn't cause this. Your son did. And it gives us grounds to add additional legal protections. Stronger than before. Evelyn nodded faintly, her eyes briefly closing. She wasn't shocked that Caleb had tried to get back into her accounts. She was shocked that she wasn't surprised. What happens now? She asked. Matthew opened the next section of the report. At minimum, the bank will restrict his access to any accounts connected to your name, permanently, and because of the lender's ongoing review, this may complicate his mortgage situation even further. Helen let out a low whistle. He brought this on himself. Matthew folded his hands. I want to reinforce your legal shields. Power of attorney designations, trust protections, inheritance revisions, anything that prevents him from attempting this again. Evelyn nodded slowly. Do it. She didn't hesitate. She didn't waver. She simply chose. Meanwhile, across town, Megan was unraveling. She paced their kitchen while Caleb sat at the table with his head in his hands. Bills, notices, and printed emails were spread across the wood surface like evidence at a crime scene. Financial misconduct? Megan shouted, her voice cracking. Do you know what that does to our credit score? Do you know what happens to our refinancing? Caleb didn't answer. He stared at the notice from the bank, his failed attempts highlighted in digital red. Why would you even try to get into her account? Megan demanded. I panicked. He snapped back. We needed the money. You wanted the money. Megan's expression flickered, guilt and fury twisting together. And now? Now she's going to drag us down with her stubbornness. Caleb slammed a fist against the table. Don't blame this on her, His voice broke. I'm the one who screwed up. For once, his admission didn't calm Megan. It terrified her. We can't survive this, she whispered. Caleb, we might actually lose the house. And deep down, in the pit of his stomach, Caleb knew it. That evening, Evelyn stood stirring a pot of soup when the front door opened softly. Sadie stepped inside, snow still caught in her eyelashes. Hi, Grandma. Evelyn smiled. Hello, sweetheart. Sadie shrugged off her backpack and moved into the kitchen, her expression more serious than someone her age should ever have to hold. Can I stay here tonight? She asked. Maybe. For a few days? Evelyn set the spoon down gently. Of course. Always. Sadie stepped closer, lowering her voice. Dad's losing it. Mom can't stop yelling. And everyone keeps pretending it's your fault, but Grandma? It's not. I know it's not. Evelyn swallowed, heart aching. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle. I'd rather be here with you, Sadie said, where it's calm. That, more than anything, told Evelyn the damage in that house wasn't just financial. It was emotional. Layered, long-standing. Sadie hesitated, then added quietly, Dad said the bank is investigating him. She bit her lip. Is that true? Evelyn chose honesty. It's what happens when someone tries to access an account they're not allowed to. Sadie nodded slowly. He did that because he's scared, not because of you. Evelyn touched her granddaughter's cheek. I know. A long silence settled between them, warm, not heavy. Then Evelyn said, There's something else I need to finalize. For you. She walked to the coffee table and lifted a folder, Matthew's updated trust documents. She looked at Sadie with calm, steady resolve. These protect your future, she said, and I want you to be part of that decision. Sadie blinked, startled. My future? Evelyn nodded. Yes, your home, your security, your life ahead. Sadie's breath caught. Grandma. Evelyn opened the folder and laid the pages out before her. Then she reached for the pen. Snow drifted across the Boise sky the next morning, soft and slow, the kind that made the world look gentle even when nothing inside the houses was. Evelyn's home was quiet, too quiet for what she sensed was coming. She was pouring coffee when she heard the sharp crunch of tires biting into the icy driveway. A truck door slammed, then another. Heavy footsteps pounded up the walkway. She didn't rush. She set the coffee pot down, wiped her hands on a towel, and walked to the door with steady, measured steps. Caleb didn't knock. He burst inside, breath fogging in the cold air, panic vibrating off him like static. "Mom," he said, voice cracking. "Please, we have to talk. Now." Megan stood behind him, wrapped in her coat, face pale and tight. This time she didn't bother with sharp comments or smugness. She looked terrified. Evelyn stepped back to let them in. "Come inside, it's cold." Caleb didn't sit. He paced in jagged lines across the living room, hair sticking up like he'd been pulling at it for hours. The lender called again. "They're escalating the review. They want documents, proof, explanations." He dragged a shaky breath. "Mom, we can't fix this without you. Please, reverse it." Evelyn folded the towel slowly, smoothing the corners. "I can't." "You won't," Caleb corrected, voice rising. "You can tell them you let me access that account. You can restart the transfers. You can make this go away." Evelyn set the towel down. "Caleb, I'm not lying for you." He froze as if she'd slapped him. Megan took a step forward, anger and fear tangled in her voice. "You're really going to stand there and pretend you're innocent in this? You started this avalanche." "No," Evelyn said. "I stopped being part of yours." Megan's expression twisted. "You're abandoning your family. At your age, do you understand how cruel this is?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "Cruel is taking from someone again and again, then mocking them for existing." Caleb pressed both palms against the table, bowing his head. "Mom, please. I can't lose the house." "You told me I wasn't needed," Evelyn said simply. "I heard you." A voice came from the doorway. "I heard him too." Helen stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat, eyes sharp as flint. She moved to stand beside Evelyn with the confidence of someone who'd waited decades for the truth to surface. Caleb let out a strangled breath. "This isn't her business." Helen crossed her arms. "It became my business the first time you expected your mother to finance your life." Megan spun toward her. "Stay out of it." "Gladly," Helen said, "once you stop blaming Evelyn for problems you created." Caleb's voice broke. "Mom, they said the review could go to the lender's legal department. They said unauthorized access looks like misconduct." "It is misconduct," Evelyn replied. "You tried to enter an account after I removed you." "I panicked," he shouted. "We needed the money." "You needed accountability," Helen shot back. Megan's breath trembled. "We don't have the documents they want. We don't have the savings to catch up. We don't have—" "You don't have me," Evelyn finished. "Not anymore." Caleb stepped closer, eyes red, voice barely audible. "Mom, I thought you'd always be there." "I was," Evelyn said quietly. "Much longer than you deserved." The words didn't hold venom, just truth. Megan grabbed her purse, shaking. "Then we're done here." Caleb followed her to the door, defeated in a way she'd never seen. He paused once, looking back at Evelyn. A silent plea, a last-ditch hope. She didn't move. He left. The door shut. The silence afterward was deep, almost echoing. Evelyn exhaled. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Matthew. "Evelyn, the lender wants a formal statement from you. They believe you're a key witness." Helen looked at her, eyes widening. Evelyn waited for them. For once, she had chosen the terms. She chose the time, the place, the setting. And she sat in her own living room, quiet, composed, while the winter sun glimmered through the blinds and cast long, steady shadows across the floor. The folder lay on the coffee table, thick, heavy, final. Caleb and Megan arrived late, the tension between them visible from the driveway. They stepped inside without speaking to each other. Caleb's shoulders sagged under the weight of the last few days. Megan's eyes were sharp and panicked, as if constantly scanning for an escape route. Evelyn didn't offer them seats. They sat anyway. Helen remained beside Evelyn, arms crossed, expression unreadable but unwavering. She wasn't here to speak. She was here to witness. Caleb swallowed hard. Mom, you said the lender wants a statement from you. Are you going to give it? I am, Evelyn said calmly. Truthfully. Megan stiffened. Truthfully? Evelyn. Sit, Evelyn said softly, and the firmness of it drew an immediate silence over the room. She lifted the folder and placed it in front of Caleb. This, she said, is also something you need to see. Caleb stared at the folder as if it were radioactive. What is it? My updated legal documents. He hesitated, then slowly lifted the flap. Paper rustled, thick formal pages. His eyes scanned the first page, then the next. Confusion tightened his brow. Then fear. Then something worse. Recognition. What? His voice cracked. Mom, what is this? Megan leaned over his shoulder, reading quickly. Her breath hitched. Her face went pale, almost gray. This can't be real. Caleb looked up, hands shaking. You took me out of the trust? I did. All of it? His voice broke. Everything? Yes? Megan's hand flew to her mouth. Evelyn. This is extreme. This, Evelyn said evenly, is overdue. Caleb stared down at the page again, reading the lines that removed him as beneficiary. The signatures notarized cleanly by Helen, the legal seals stamped firm and permanent. His eyes drifted to the line naming Sadie as full beneficiary. You left everything? To her? He whispered. Yes. Caleb shook his head violently. Mom, no, you can't do this. We're your family. You are my son, Evelyn corrected. Family acts with respect. Megan clutched his arm. Tell her she can't do this. Tell her she's hurting all of us. Evelyn didn't respond to Megan. She kept her eyes on her son, the boy she had raised, the man she had supported, the man who had thrown her worth aside with a single arrogant sentence. Caleb leaned forward, voice thick with desperation. Mom, please. This is everything. The house, the savings, the accounts. You've wiped me out. No, she said softly. You did that. He flinched. I just stopped being the solution. Caleb scrubbed his hands over his face, shaking. I was angry. I said something awful. I shouldn't have. I know that. But this is too much. Evelyn's voice remained steady. It wasn't one moment, Caleb. It was years. Years of you treating my support as your right, my presence as clutter, my life as something you were forced to tolerate. Mom, you called me spare, Evelyn said. I heard you clearly. A long silence filled the room. Cold, sharp, necessary. Caleb closed the folder as though it physically hurt him. His shoulders collapsed inward. Can you reconsider? He whispered. Just give me a chance to fix things. I'll do better. I swear I will. Evelyn held his gaze. Not angry, not bitter, just done. No, Caleb, she said. I'm choosing peace, and you don't get to decide its terms. He looked at her as though she had just walked away from him on a cliff's edge. Megan's jaw tightened, fury and disbelief warring on her face. Caleb stood slowly, hands trembling. He opened his mouth as if to speak again, but nothing came out. No excuses, no charm, no manipulation left to pull. He simply nodded once, defeated. Then he left. Megan followed, whispering curses under her breath, but even she knew arguing further was pointless. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was lighter than any Evelyn had felt in years. Helen placed a gentle hand on her arm. You did it. Evelyn exhaled. I did. She looked at the folder on the table, now permanently closed. The house was quiet after Caleb and Megan left, quiet in a way that felt earned. Evelyn sat for a moment longer, letting her breath even out, letting her spine relax against the chair she'd always felt small in. Not today. Not anymore. Helen stood and gathered the folder from the table, tapping the edges into a neat rectangle. Before we file these, let's go over everything one last time, she said, just so you know exactly what you're locking in. Evelyn nodded. Yes, let's. They moved to the dining table where afternoon light spread across the wood in a golden sheet. Helen opened the folder, sliding the trust documents toward her. Here, Helen said, pointing to the line that had been debated, reviewed, and signed, but never fully felt until now. This names Sadie as the sole beneficiary. Evelyn traced the line with a fingertip. Her glasses glinted in the sunlight as she read it again, slower this time. Sadie Monroe, full beneficiary. Does it still feel right? Helen asked. More than right. Evelyn's voice was quiet but steady. She's the only one who ever saw me. She initialed the margin, confirming the final version. The pen didn't shake at all. Helen smiled softly. Then these are your freedom papers. A gentle knock sounded from the doorway. For a moment, Evelyn assumed it was Sadie coming back early. But when she opened the door, Caleb and Megan stood outside. Again. But this time, different. Their faces were soft, rehearsed, almost gentle. Megan even attempted a smile, thin and brittle but unmistakably strategic. Mom, Caleb said, voice low and overly calm. Can we talk? Helen stepped behind Evelyn, silent but watchful. Evelyn didn't invite them in. Not yet. About what? Caleb reached out as if to touch her arm, but stopped halfway, remembering his place. We want to apologize. For earlier. For everything. He swallowed hard. We didn't handle things right. Megan nodded quickly. We should have been more understanding. We acted out of panic. The shift was so sudden, so transparent, Evelyn felt an almost physical stillness settle in her chest. She waited. Caleb cleared his throat. We're just hoping maybe we can all start fresh. A clean slate. He forced a hopeful smile. As a family. Evelyn watched them both carefully. And what exactly would starting fresh mean? Megan answered too quickly. Well, maybe we could revisit the trust updates, make adjustments that help everyone. There it was. Not remorse, not repair. A financial pitch dressed in emotion. Evelyn let the silence stretch, watching the flicker of impatience grow behind Megan's eyes, the strain pulling at Caleb's jaw. I see, she finally said. Caleb took a half step forward. Mom, please. We can fix this together. If you just... No, Evelyn said gently. We can't. Megan's veneer cracked instantly. So that's it? You're choosing her over your own son? I'm choosing honesty, Evelyn replied, and peace, and the one person who never treated me like an inconvenience. Caleb exhaled shakily, shoulders slumping. You really won't reconsider? I did reconsider, Evelyn said. That's why these papers exist at all. Megan let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. No, Evelyn said. Predictable. She stepped back and closed the door. Not harshly, not triumphantly, just firmly. Inside, the quiet returned like a warm blanket. Helen nodded once. You handled that perfectly. Evelyn released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I'm done letting them pull me back into drowning waters. A moment later, the front door opened again, but softly this time. Sadie stepped inside, cheeks flushed from the cold. She looked at Evelyn, then at the trust document still open on the table. Grandma? She asked quietly. Are those? Evelyn nodded. Yes, it's final now. Sadie moved toward her slowly, as if approaching something sacred. Then she threw her arms around Evelyn, tight, trembling, grateful. I'm so glad you chose yourself, Sadie whispered into her shoulder. I'm so glad you chose me. Evelyn closed her eyes, holding her granddaughter close. For the first time in years, she didn't feel spare. She felt claimed. She felt seen. She felt free. The next morning dawned bright and brittle, the kind of Idaho winter day where the sunlight cut sharp lines across the snow and made the world look cleaner than it really was. Evelyn sat at her dining table, her glasses perched low on her nose, the final stack of estate papers spread neatly in front of her. Helen poured them both coffee. Ready for the last signature? She asked. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Yes. I think I've been ready longer than I realized. She picked up the pen, smoothing the final document toward herself. It named Sadie, not as temporary heir, not as partial heir, but as the sole inheritor of everything Evelyn had built, saved, or fought for. Her home, her accounts, her investments, her future security. Evelyn's hand didn't tremble, not even a flicker. With one clean stroke, she signed her name. Helen let out a quiet, triumphant breath. Well, she said, smiling, there it is, the final inheritance. But Evelyn wasn't quite done. She reached for one more folder, this one thinner, newer, something she'd discussed with Matthew only yesterday. There's an addendum, she said. Helen raised an eyebrow. Oh? Evelyn opened it and showed Helen the page. A dedicated fund for Sadie's future home, seeded with the emergency savings Evelyn had spent years accumulating, untouched by Caleb's hands. She shouldn't have to struggle the way I did, Evelyn said. And I don't want Caleb anywhere near the life she builds. Helen's eyes softened. You're giving her a foundation he never appreciated. Evelyn nodded. Exactly. She signed that paper too, quietly, decisively. Across town, Caleb Monroe opened his mailbox without thinking, half asleep and still hoping this week's avalanche would somehow stop mid-slide. A thick envelope slid into his hand. Official, stamped, certified. He froze. Caleb? Megan called from inside. What is it now? He tore it open with shaking fingers. The words blurred at first. Then they sharpened. Notice of formal disinheritance. Revocation of all beneficiary rights. Updated estate. Effective immediately. Caleb's breath punched out of him. He sank onto the porch step, the cold wood creaking under him. Megan snatched the papers from his hands and scanned the lines. No, she whispered. No, she didn't. She didn't actually. She looked at Caleb with something between rage and horror. This is your fault, she hissed. You said one stupid sentence and now we've lost everything. Caleb dragged a hand down his face. I didn't know she'd go this far. Megan stepped back from him as if he were contagious. You pushed her too hard. You treated her like an ATM, and then you insulted her? Of course she snapped. She's my mother, he said helplessly. She wasn't supposed to do this. Well, Megan said coldly, she did. She tossed the papers onto his lap and walked back inside, slamming the door. Caleb stared at the notice, numb. He'd expected consequences. But not this. Never this. That evening, Evelyn sat at her writing desk, the one Mark built decades ago, the one she'd refurbished after he passed. She pulled out a sheet of stationery, floral-edged and neatly pressed. She began writing. Not to Caleb, not to Megan, to Sadie. My sweet girl, there are things a grandmother hopes for her granddaughter. Safety, peace, and a home where she is wanted. I can't control the world, but I can make sure you begin yours stronger than I did. Her pen moved slowly, but every word carried weight. Acknowledgement, love, a kind of gentleness she had never been allowed to offer Caleb. She wrote about resilience. She wrote about choices. She wrote about the difference between helping someone grow and enabling someone to sink you. When she finished, she folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope marked with Sadie's name. Just as she set it aside, Helen walked in carrying 2 mugs of tea and a grin. "To freedom," she said, raising her cup slightly. Evelyn lifted hers in return. "To freedom." They clinked gently. "Sadie's coming by later," Evelyn added. "I want to give her the letter in person." But before Helen could respond, Evelyn's phone buzzed sharply against the desk. A new message, from an unknown number, short, urgent. "Mrs. Monroe, please call me. This is Caleb. It's about Sadie." Caleb's urgent message had rattled the air for a moment, but when Evelyn returned his call, breath tight with worry, she learned the truth. Sadie had simply turned off her phone during art club. Nothing more. Panic from a man unraveling. Another fire he tried to set in someone else's chest. Evelyn refused to let it claim space in hers. 3 weeks passed. 3 quiet, steady, restorative weeks. Her life, once shaped around being useful to someone who resented her presence, blossomed into something she hadn't expected. Her own. The first change Evelyn made was the house. Her living room, which had always been arranged around what looked best for guests, shifted into what felt best for her. She moved the sofa closer to the window where the morning sun warmed the cushions. She replaced the heavy curtains with soft linen panels that fluttered in the slightest breeze. The wall clock Caleb always complained about. Too loud, too old-fashioned. Now hung proudly again, ticking with a sound that felt like reclamation. She bought a handful of framed prints from a local artisan fair. Landscapes of Idaho forests, soft watercolor barns, a print of aspens in gold season that she hung in the entryway, where Caleb used to toss his boots and mutter about clutter. Not anymore. The house breathed differently without his weight inside it, without hers carrying him. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Evelyn drove to the Boise Senior Haven, a small, cheerful center that always needed extra hands. She'd walked in expecting to volunteer once. She ended up staying 3 hours. They needed help preparing lunches. She was good at that. They needed someone to sit with the memory care residents. She was good at that too. They needed someone who could listen. Evelyn had decades of practice listening. What surprised her was how much she enjoyed being heard. Nancy, one of the coordinators, hugged her on her 3rd visit. "You're exactly what we needed around here," she said. "You bring calm with you." Evelyn smiled quietly. No one had said anything like that to her in years. One Friday afternoon, the front door swung open and Sadie stepped inside, cheeks flushed from the cold. She carried a large sketch pad pressed to her chest. "Grandma, look." She laid the pad on the kitchen table and flipped it open. Evelyn stilled. It was a portrait, not of her face, but of her posture. She sat in her favorite chair, chin lifted, eyes steady, hands folded gently in her lap. The colors were soft, warm, deliberate. Sadie had captured the moment Evelyn told her the truth about the finances, the disrespect, the boundary she finally placed. "I called it unbreakable," Sadie said, cheeks reddening. "My art teacher wants to display it at the winter showcase." Evelyn blinked back, warmth gathering behind her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You saw me." Sadie hugged her, arms tight and sure. "I always did." Around 4 that evening, the screen door rattled lightly and Helen appeared, holding a loaf of fresh-baked sourdough wrapped in a kitchen towel. "Peace offering," she announced. "Peace from what?" Evelyn asked, smiling. Helen winked. "From your former life." They cut the bread while the winter light spilled long and amber across the counters. The soft crackle of crust filled the kitchen, warm and comforting. They slathered slices in honey butter and ate standing by the stove, laughing about nothing in particular. For the first time in decades, Evelyn wasn't bracing for someone's demands. She wasn't waiting to be useful. She wasn't shrinking. She was simply living. As dusk deepened, the two friends carried mugs of tea to the porch. Sadie joined them with a blanket draped around her shoulders. The three of them sat on the wooden steps, watching the pine silhouettes sway against a lavender sky. A quiet, contented silence wrapped around them. "This feels right," Evelyn murmured. "It is right," Helen said. Sadie rested her head on Evelyn's shoulder. "This is home," she whispered. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the breeze brush her cheeks. For the first time in her adult life, she felt entirely free, entirely her own. But as the evening settled, a car slowed near the curb. Headlights lingered. A familiar shape behind the windshield watched the house silently before driving on. Helen noticed. Sadie noticed. And Evelyn's peaceful breath caught. Caleb wasn't done. The next morning, frost laced the edges of Evelyn's bedroom window. The light was soft, the kind that didn't demand anything from her. She wrapped herself in her robe and padded toward the kitchen, expecting silence. Instead, she found an envelope on the porch. White, unmarked, weighed down by a smooth river stone. Helen must have noticed her pause through the window as she carried her own coffee mug to the sink. "You don't have to open it," she murmured. But Evelyn did. She lifted the envelope, feeling the cold paper against her fingers. The handwriting on the flap. She recognized it immediately. Caleb's. Almost boyish. Almost the writing of someone who wanted to be forgiven before he finished the sentence. She opened it with her thumb. Inside was a single sheet of paper, his handwriting uneven. "Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. For the money. For the pressure. For the words I said. I didn't mean spare, I didn't mean any of it. I just didn't know how much I depended on you until you were gone." He had written more, lines about fear, about the house, about how losing everything made him see himself differently. There were a few sentences that sounded like him trying to take responsibility. A few that were excuses he probably didn't realize were excuses, and somewhere near the end, "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I hope someday. Maybe you won't hate me." Evelyn read the letter twice. Her chest rose and fell, slow and steady. Not shaken, not wounded, just quiet. She folded the paper gently, smoothing the crease with the flat of her palm. Then she walked to the hallway, opened the bottom drawer of her desk, and pulled out a manila folder she had labeled days ago. Past, she slid the letter inside. The drawer shut with the softest click. Behind her, she felt a warm presence, small arms slipping around her waist. Sadie rested her cheek between Evelyn's shoulder blades, her breath warm against the fabric of Evelyn's robe. "You okay?" Sadie asked softly. Evelyn covered her granddaughter's hands with her own. "Yes, sweetheart. I am." They stood like that for a moment, 3 generations of pain and love and history balanced between one choice and another. Sadie held her tighter, as if anchoring her to the present. "Want to sit outside for a bit?" Sadie asked. "Yes," Evelyn said. "I think I do." They stepped onto the porch together, mugs of tea warming their hands. The late afternoon sun hung low over the pines, bleeding orange and gold into the sky. It painted everything soft: the porch railing, the yard, the half-melted snow. Evelyn lowered herself into her rocking chair, the wood creaking familiarly. Sadie sat beside her, tucking her knees under the blanket she'd brought. For a long while, neither spoke. The world didn't feel heavy anymore. Caleb wasn't a storm overhead. Megan wasn't a shadow in the corner of the room. The lenders, the accounts, the panic, they all felt far, like echoes that no longer reached her. Sadie leaned her head on Evelyn's shoulder. Do you think he meant the apology? I think he meant what he could, Evelyn said. But meaning isn't the same as changing. Sadie nodded, quiet. Do you hate him? Evelyn watched the sun dip lower. No, she said softly. I just don't carry him anymore. The breeze brushed her cheeks. A pair of sparrows hopped along the porch railing. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, steady and familiar. For the first time in her 72 years, Evelyn felt something profound settle in her chest. Freedom wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was steady. A kind of breath she hadn't known she'd been holding. She inhaled deeply, slow, full, grounding, and let it out just as slowly. Sadie shifted closer, looping her arm through Evelyn's. I'm proud of you. Evelyn smiled. I'm proud of me too. Later, when Sadie went inside to start water for dinner, Evelyn stayed on the porch. She reached for the small leather-bound journal she kept in the side table drawer. The same journal she hadn't touched since Mark passed. Tonight felt right. She opened to a blank page. The sun slipped fully behind the trees, leaving the sky glowing lavender and blue. She wrote with a steady hand. Peace restored. Then, beneath it, the final line. The truth that had carried her through fire, through betrayal, through reclamation. He called me a spare human, so I pulled the one thing holding him up and stood on my own.